Hi, everyone. Welcome to our last session of our Women History Month speaker series. It's so nice to see you all here. Thank you for being here. And I also want to acknowledge our members and colleagues from the center. My name is Swelling. And before we get started, I'd like to share with you some information about the center. The Center for Global Partnerships in Learning provides GSEP students with various services ranging from publication support, certificate programs, access to the Scholarship Without Border, and a few other services such as cultural celebrations such as this one, info sessions and workshops. Now let me introduce you to our special speaker today. Yes, she's a synergetic, innovative, and equity-driven career development leader, practitioner, and scholar. She is a national certified counselor and certified career counselor. Yas received her Master of Science in Education Specialist degrees in Counseling from the Florida State University and her Bachelor of Arts degree in Psychology from the University of Kentucky. She has worked in the career development since 1999 across multiple universities in the United States and transnationally. Yas currently serves as the Executive Director of Career Services at Pepperdine University's Graduate School of Education and Psychology, and as a course lead and adjunct faculty in GSEP Psychology Division. In addition to her roles at Pepperdine, Yas is a National Career Development Association counselor, Educator Academy member, and has a private career coaching practice. Please, everyone, help me to welcome Yas. Thank you, Yas.
Thank you, Sue Ellen. And thanks all of you for being here today. I was looking forward to this time and just really in an admiration of the programming you put on this month. So we will go ahead and get started. So the title of this session is Creating Your Unique Story. And I just want to, again, thank the Center for Global Partnerships and Learning for the series of programs that you've put on for Women's History Month, and I'm honored to be a part of it. Did you say this is the last one, Sue Ellen? Okay, so this is the caboose, right?
Yes, yes.
This is the caboose. Okay.
It is a special session.
So the intention for our time together today is hopefully to be interactive, and I do have 3 learning objectives, like a good educator. The first one is, my hope is that you'll recognize how your identities have impacted your unique career story. So I know many of you in this space have done research and practice in identity work. And so hopefully this will just be a different angle as we think about its impact, or the impact of our identities on our career development. Number 2, learn about a postmodern career development paradigm for career transitions, which are so frequent in today's world of work. And then number 3, identify exploratory action steps for your next chapter. So these are 3 separate topics, and they could each be a course in themselves, but I'm trying to put together some sound bites that I think would be relevant. So as Sue Ellen said, my name is Yas Hardaway. I oversee the Career Services Department here at GSEP and have been here since 2010. So it's been a while now, approaching 13 years. And I do the career development work through our Career Services Department, and I also teach career development theories and techniques for our clinical psychology program. So career development is something that I think about all the time from different perspectives, and happy to engage in this dialogue with you today. So I also believe that career work is identity work, that our career is often an extension of who we are, or the intersectionality of our identities are expressed through our work in different ways. I also recognize that work may have different meaning for different people, that for some it's a means to an end, for some it's about community, and for some it's about self-determination. And so I also just want to recognize that career and work may have different implications for different people. I do believe, though, our identities impact our work or impact our career in different ways. So I want to take a few moments to ask you, what identities are you most aware of or think about most often? And if you could choose 3 to 5. And the other thing I'll do right now is I have a little worksheet that I'll be going through. And so if you want to download a copy to work along, you're welcome to do so as well. So what identities are you most aware of or think about most often? And this list is pulled from the United Way for Southern or Southeastern Michigan. And I liked it because it has core internal dimensions and also secondary external dimensions. So if I had to think for myself about the identities I think about most often, it's usually ethnicity, heritage, culture, economic class, and my gender identity, geographic location, relationship status, and my caretaking or parental status. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that means to me. So the next question is how have each of these identities impacted your career story over time? And some of these identities may be privileged identities or identities you identify as privileged. Some of them may feel more like marginalized or minoritized identities. And some of those categorizations may have evolved or changed over time. So I'll share what this means for me. So one of my identities that feels very, I think, salient to me is my heritage, my ethnicity. So I'm originally from Iran. I was born in Iran, and we immigrated to the US at the very start of the revolution with the intention of going back to Iran, but we never did. And I watched my parents really struggle. We were in Southeast Texas with assimilating and being one of the only Middle Easterners in our community. We're in a very small community. And I think that because of that experience growing up, I think that's what really now has, I think, motivated me to look at career development from a social justice lens and has given me another layer of empathy for immigrants who have left their home country to come to the US. And for some of them, from a career perspective, that meant starting over. It meant that maybe their education or training didn't count here. And that was a pretty challenging experience. And I know that it was for my mother in particular. And so I think that that's the why of why social justice is something that's really close to my heart and why I look at career development from that perspective. My identity as a woman, my identity as a career woman, I would say in particular, has always been very salient for me. And I think I was always told to be independent, to not rely on anyone else financially for support. And so I think because of that, I have been very career focused. I didn't partner until my late 30s, didn't have my child until my late 30s. And I think that my career was just a very salient part of my life for so long. Geography, I lived in Southeast Texas, West Virginia. I went to school in Kentucky and then Florida State in Northern Florida. And I think within those contexts, geographically and politically, I definitely felt my identity as a Middle Easterner, as an Iranian, more from I think a marginalized perspective. I have always identified as a woman of color. But the way that's changed for me over time is coming to Los Angeles and realizing that my light skin privilege is also something important for me to own and to be able to use that positionality to advocate for others through my work and to realize, that, who is not gaining access, and what is it that I can do to help support greater access through my work. Social economic status, that's, I think, a salient part of my identity from more of a privileged perspective. I have always had access to education, undergraduate education, graduate education. There wasn't an issue about whether or not I could go. And I think that that's something that, I see as an immense privilege, and has certainly impacted my career development, because it's allowed me to pursue the work that I wanted to pursue without barriers that many may face. My identity as a partner, as a spouse. My husband is a freelancer, and so I'm the one that has the stable employment, that has the benefits, and that's the way our system is set up right now. And so for me to decide to change jobs or change work would impact my family system. We would have to, something would have to change. And so I'm just aware of that responsibility and that role now as being someone who has the consistent earnings and has the benefits. And then lastly, as a mother, so I'm a mother to a 7-year-old, and because of that role, I need my work to have flexibility, to be a family-friendly organization. And so that role, that identity, has also impacted my career development today, whereas in the past, that wasn't a salient for me. So I say all this because our identities influence our lens, right? And it's not just one identity, it's the intersectionality of our identities that impact the way that we see the world and the way that we experience the world. So I'd like to take a moment and go into breakout groups and have you all, if you're comfortable, share what aspects of your identity are salient to you and how have they impacted your career story over time. Okay. So let's go ahead. Okay, here we go. So, well, maybe I'll pause the recording.
Yes.
We talk about identity, or the intersectionality of our identity, in terms of our own self-awareness and our lens and how we experience the world. But we actually evolve in activity, right? We're not in a bubble, we're not in isolation, and we're internalizing cultural and social practices from the external world. So in a sense, it's not just about me constructing my own identity, but I'm co-constructing it through these interpersonal processes, right? So similar to what you said, Linda, some of the messaging that you received, and what Maria piggybacked on as well, too, that there's also these social processes, too, that impact the way that we experience and evolve in our in the world, right? And I think what makes it a little bit more complex is that today's world of work is constantly changing. So perhaps the messaging, the activity that we're experiencing and are integrating is also changing very rapidly too. And we're having to constantly adapt. And this is very different than how the world of work was in the past. After the war, veterans would return and they would take assessments, a battery of assessments, which would tell them, they would match them to civilian careers, right? And so that was a process of career planning, is that what do you match with? Based on your interests, your values, your strengths, what type of occupations do you match with? And whatever you end up selecting is where you're going to stay and where you'll grow and work your way up the ladder, right? And so often that people would choose a career path, they would form a relationship with an employer and they would stay there until retirement. And that was the way that career planning went for so many. And that's not the case anymore, right? And so if we rely on scores and we're matched to jobs based on those scores, what happens when those jobs change? right? And I think COVID has been such a great example of sudden change that have caused and disrupted many lines of work, right? And so if we rely on our job as our identity, our occupation as our identity, when it changes, that can rattle our identity. And so what I want to talk to you about today is really, instead of looking at scores, instead of looking at stages when we think about career development, let's think about stories, right? And what are life themes that can be repurposed no matter what the world of work is doing? Because we can repurpose those life themes across different types of occupations as the world of work evolves. And as transitions in today's world of work become more frequent, adaptability now is a necessity. We have to be able to adapt quickly. And so I want to introduce this particular career development theory. It's called career construction theory, and was developed by a theorist and practitioner in career development called, his name was Dr. Mark Savickas. And so what he believes is that through storytelling, we can help identify our life themes and repurpose them across different occupations as we grow. And he uses more of a constructivist perspective or narrative perspective to be able to clarify the next chapter in our career and to navigate career transition. So if you look at the worksheet, that leads us to the second part of clarifying my next chapter. And so you'll see a link to this autobiography workbook for life career success that he created. And what he believes is that there's 3 parts to a career transition. Part one is about telling your story. And so he provides a series of questions about yourself, and you, at each of those questions, tell one part of your whole life career story. Part 2 is about hearing your story, so being able to articulate it and share it with others. And then part 3 is about enacting your story. So there's this reflection component to it when you're telling the story. There's this audience component where you're interacting, right, in this social dynamic, and you're being and others are reflecting back to you. And then there's this enacting phase where you go out and you actually take action in order to actualize or make this transition. And so we don't have time to go through the full career story, but there's 2 questions in particular I wanted to start with that I thought would be interesting for conversation. And so Dr. Savickas, he identifies 6 main questions. So the first one is about, what transition are you experiencing right now? And maybe you are happy where you are, but every once in a while you think about, what would I do next, or what would that next step look like? And then number 2 is, what occupations, have you considered or are you considering? And occupations might be too broad. It could be a functional area. It could be a type of an organization. Then he gets to questions that are more personal. And these personal questions are designed to elicit stories that point to life themes that we can carry with us across multiple transitions. So the first question is, who did you admire growing up and why? And he asks us to think back to when we were 3 to 6 years old, which, if you're like me, that's a little bit of a stretch, but as early as you can. And he asks us to think about role models who were not our immediate caregivers, because he says we don't choose our caregivers, we choose our role models. And the reason we choose our role models is because there's qualities that they have that we either have ourselves or are aspiring to. And those reflect our values. Those qualities that we pull from our role models are oftentimes what we used growing up to cope with challenges. Okay. Number 4, what are your favorite magazines, TV shows, websites, and why? These reflect our manifested interests. What do you read about or watch when no one's telling you to read or watch anything? Dr. Gabby and I were having this conversation earlier about reading. We can take an assessment, and it might point to particular career interests, but oftentimes assessments are based on what we've been exposed to. And not all of us have been exposed equally to everything, right? But everyone has stories. So what magazines, if anyone reads magazines anymore, they can be online magazines, blogs, TV shows, websites, are we drawn to and why? And what are the themes across those? Number 5 is, what is your favorite current story from a book or film? Savvikas believes that this gives us insight to the next chapter. He says current story because we choose this story from a book or film based on the transition that we're facing. And the way that we tell the story reflects what we are aspiring to or working towards for that next chapter. And then number 6 is, what is your favorite saying? And this is the script that we will use to enact our next career transition. Now, in addition to this workbook, there's this interview that he does called the career construction interview, and it has a last question. And the last question is 3 early recollections, but that he believed that needs to have a trained counselor or clinician to be able to help people process those recollections, because some of them can point to trauma. So for the workbook, these are the main ones that he identifies as helping you in a more kind of a self-help approach. So I'd like for you to take a few moments, and on your worksheet, you can just jot down some reflections on what transition are you facing right now, or what do you think your next transition might be? And then, who did you admire growing up? And I'm looking for three role models. 3 role models, and they can be famous, they can be celebrities, they can be cartoons, they can be teachers, they can be relatives, but preferably those who are not your immediate caregivers. So 3 role models and how you would describe them, qualities you would use to describe each of them. So let's take some time to do that, and then we'll get into breakouts. Is about enacting my story, and this is really taking steps to move forward. And I'm going to shift from Mark Savvikas's work to a different theorist, and his name is Dr. John D. Krumboldt, who's now passed, but he created this theory called happenstance learning theory. And I love this. I love his perspective because I find it to be so relevant in such a rapidly changing world of work. And maybe before I show this, I'll just give a little bit of background. He says that when if you survey someone at 18 and ask them what they want to be, and then survey them later in life, only 2% will have actually pursued what they said that they were going to pursue. And he said that while it's good to have goals and plans, that we have to always remember that there's unanticipated events that happen that will impact our journey, and we have to be able to adapt to those and use them as learning experiences. So instead of forcing us to make decisions prematurely, why don't we commit to exploratory action and trust that each exploratory action will provide a learning experience and give us information one way or the other. And the example that he gave, which I loved, is it's like riding a bike. When you're teaching someone, I was about to say kid, but I mean, some people learn to ride bikes later, right? When you're teaching someone to ride a bike, it's not like you hand them an instruction book and expect them to then study it and get on the bike and know how to ride it. They go through a series of trial and error where they have to fall off, and then they figured out, no, I can't do that. And then they get back on and they try again. And that's how life is, right? That we, as we experience life, if we approach it more as a series of learning experiences, and that trust that our goals will evolve as we get more information, that can just relieve a bit of stress. And it's also the reality that we live in, right? And so he co-authored this book called Luck is No Accident, and it talks about the happenstance theory learning approach. And the piece of it that I wanted to draw our attention to today is his concept of exploratory action. Because as we think about what is next in our career journey, sometimes it can feel a bit daunting. It might feel accessible. It might feel too far away. It might feel like, how am I going to even make that happen? So instead of trying to force a transition too quickly, what we can do is commit to exploratory action. We can stop and ask myself, what do I know right now? What information is missing? What action can I take right now? And then what did I learn from it? And then repeat. So an example I give is if someone, for example, is interested in psychology. So what do I know? I know I love studying people and why they do what they do. And I think I will look into graduate programs in psychology. Okay, that's what I know. What is missing? I am overwhelmed by the possibilities within the field of psychology. So that right there could keep me stuck, right? But if I think, well, what action can I take right now? Well, I can make a list of the 5 specializations I'm interested in, and then I can talk to graduate school enrollment advisors about each one of those. And then reflect, what did I learn from those conversations? Well, now I know that some programs lead to state licensure and others don't. And I know that so now what I know that I want a program that leads to state licensure. So now what's missing? Well, I don't know what population I want to work with. What action can I take? Well, I can research different field experience sites at different programs. And so you see how it can go on from there. And I just find that when I'm working with students and they have this goal and it feels very daunting, that we talk about what's one exploratory action that you can take, and trust that that action will give you more information about how you feel or about what's involved. And then from there, you're in a different place to take another action. And so I just want to offer that as we close, and we all are thinking about maybe what's next. And if not now, we might be thinking about that in the future, and just offering this approach that might make it a little bit less daunting and more the reality of how life goes anyway, right? So that's all I have for today. Thank you for your presence and bearing with me as we put together 3 very different topics and tried them out a bit. So I just appreciate your time and attention and your honest reflections today. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, this is so powerful. This is a very good way to close our month sessions. And unintentionally, everything is connected because it's a piece of what Dr. Heather, who is here, talked about self-promotion. Because what I see is we women mainly, we don't talk about our careers because we are more concerned about doing some specific tasks. So having this framework is so helpful. So thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I also wanted to share with you all that we have another speaker series coming up, the Global Leadership Speaker Series, in partnership with our Dean office, Dr. June. She's starting her first lecture in April 6 at 6 p.m. You can register and enjoy one of our sessions. In April, we will have Dr. June, Dr. Shockman, and Dr. Janie Walker with 3 different topics. Dr. June will open us, then Dr. Shockman will talk about the geopolitics, and Dr. Jane Walker will talk about the sustainable goals. So a lot of things coming that will help us to increase our global mindset as leaders. I hope you can join us. With that, I think we close this session. Thank you so much again, Yas. Thank you everyone for being here with us, supporting us. I really hope you have enjoyed our sessions. And that's it. Have a wonderful week.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.